Mafia, Buffalo versus the Multiverse. By me, Travis Carlson. Preface. Welcome to the Multiverse. Bills fan or not, you are holding or listening to one of the most ambitious and certainly unique artistic expressions to ever come out of a sports season. So ambitious and unique, it could very well never happen again. Time will tell. You are from the future, not me. I'm in my attic office listening to the crickets and train whistles of South Buffalo. I've logged a lot of hours here over the last 14 months with this project open and my imagination turned loose. The idea. What if I took the story of the Bills, the real stories of our city, that anything could happen? What if the creativity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Ray Bradbury were applied to the drama and depth of a football season? By Buffalo, for Buffalo. So add in the fandemonium of Bills Mafia, plus the rich nuances of the greatest city on Earth, and illustrate it with the very cutting edge of AI art tools that didn't even exist week one. Oh, and to my surprise, 2022 to 2023 in Buffalo didn't need any help from me to be unforgettable. Sure, this included not one but two of the league-named games of the year, but also two record-breaking blizzards. And of course, the unthinkable. The result. Our city and heroes face off against 17 plus weeks of villainous opponents from dangerous worlds and eccentric cultures. From the painful heat of the Great Drought and the discovery of a farm boy with two first names to the unbelievable quest to save Strongheart Hamlin, an origin story worthy of Buffalo is born. Dear reader, don't worry if references fly by. Just trust the process. For as many deep cuts that I planted, and not simply sports, there's no wrong way to engage. You can make it a puzzle, or you can breeze right through. Just know that a kid from Buffalo, hearing train whistles in his sleep, gave this all of his free time for free, and his very, very best. The dream? To give our small home of strong hearts something that's just ours, and worthy of the name, and the Patriots can't steal. This is how a filmmaker/writer smashes tables, and it's been an absolute blast to create. So fasten your seatbelts, because Buffalo's got a multiverse. And where else would you rather be? Travis Carlson, October 1st, 2023. Mafia, Buffalo versus the Multiverse.
Once upon a time, in the Buffalo Nation, giants ruled the world. Cowboys and Indians devastated the West. These enemies brought fire, and their fire brought pain.
"That's us," whispered the boy to the white pillow behind his back. only it wasn't a pillow at all, but their youngest horse, Philly. He played the words again from the antique book.
Fire brought.
Joshua Patrick Allen? Mom burst through the door. Josh and Philly fell to sleep so fast their heads bounced. Won't you give it up? Dad tucked you in before work. Yeah, but... And he told me that he read to you. Nobody read to Philly, and she doesn't have a mama. How could she say no to that? Josh's mama turned up her oil lamp and snuggled in next to them. You know, you let Philly stay so close, she'll have trouble leaving you. That's okay. Oh, is it? Now, what's all this about us being in an old fairy tale? Mama hefted up the smelly old book, and it fell open to the page of cowboys and Indians and giants. She slid the voice box over the words, and the scratchy narrator continued.
But even from the hero wars of darkness and flame, there were those who resisted. In a hopeless last stand against insurmountable odds, the great machine gun Kelly fought and fell. His second, the architect of the Battle of Comeback, Frank Lloyd Wright, was hijacked in the engine of his own train. The cowboys gathered their plunder in that stolen train and sped away toward their glorious Republic of Dallas. But 2 days later, from the mists of dawn, a blue and red speck could be seen on the horizon. A farmer, with no name, galloped from the footnotes of Total War and derailed a car with the only weapon left behind, a BB gun. Even after the hero wars, why some stayed behind to suffer was never known. But some clan mothers believe the way of the Mafia could still beat in the people. The strong hearts.
Mrs. Allen closed her eyes and shut the book. Their family's only book. The book of plays. Philly snuggled into the pillow and her little son beamed. How to break it to him. Josh, Pumpkin. The hero wars were many eras ago, and I think a lot of the stories are more like tall tales. Myths. Yeah, but it's in our book. Well, books are made up to be fun, or inspiring, or in this case, really, really sad, I guess. Look, the only natives we know are our best friends, and I've never seen a cowboy. Just cows and boys with giant imaginations. She ruffled Philly and his bangs. Well, then how come we're in it? In it? She tried to laugh, but didn't notice she clutched her chest. As strong hearts? Their fire brought pain. Little Josh recited each word slowly. Mama was deep in thought until a faint smile bent her lips. She blinked slowly. Fire brought and the fire ba are two different words, sweetie. And, well, the rains we were counting on didn't come this year. So we need you and your faithful steed on the farm and at the inn. We bloom where we're planted, and that's right here, right now. She kissed Philly and Josh on the forehead. Go Bills, you two. Go Bills. The red flicker of the lantern faded into darkness from outside Josh's window as Mrs. Allen walked out. The two moons over the desert allowed just enough blue glow to reveal the 1850s steamboat they lived in, sitting askew in the endless sand dunes of the Buffalo Nation. A fresh coat of paint had been added to the name, the Firebaugh Ferry. A blue spark lit up Josh's window again. The voice box kept reading.
On some nights in the lost sands of the Niagara, some claim they can still hear the distant whistle of a train horn. and undying hope over the horizon.
Little Philly whinnied, and 17 years later, Josh of Allentown hurtled through the sands. Philly rode like thunder. Sweat streaked off skin. A train whistle blew. They galloped past Deepwell, ducked under big trees, snagging an apple, and apologized to the chickens they scattered from Dry Basin. Yah! Blasting a dust cloud, they galloped through the shadow of the Colossus ruins. An enormous right foot, half buried in the dunes, was all that remained. Philly crested the sand ridge, splashing hot dust in the sun. Josh's desert headscarf whipped behind him. His eyes shone bright. The silver locomotive. The whistle blew. Josh and Philly chased it, broadside. In the cracks between each rushing car, the white horse and her desert rider grew larger and larger, black and bright, black and bright, black, and she wasn't slowing down. Josh eyed the final gap between cars. It raced forward. It couldn't be much wider than a buzzard wingspan, or a saddled horse for that matter. He meant to jump it. The terror noise of the train warned against it. The whistle screamed, coal burned, steam boiled. All reminders that the metal tonnage would crush, sever, and pulverize anything it touched. Just ask the steel rails wedging into rock. Black bright, black bright, black bright, black bright, black white rider and horse. Josh hurtled between speeding cars and landed in full stride galloping. The desert flats and wind raced away below them. They flew, just like the no-name farmer Bibi. Josh clapped Philly with both hands on the neck in sheer joy as she began to slow down. She whinnied as much as he laughed, and they looked back to the train where they'd come from. Too much like Farmer Bibi. Oh no. Brigadier General McDermott stepped off the iron stairs of his train car into the red dirt. His dirt. He scooped up a handful and hefted it like flour to feel its weight, its heat, its thorns, but not just its weight, its burden. The fire brought its pain. McDermott hefted it again. This handful of sand and the millions upon millions more that made up this dust bowl were now ultimately his responsibility. Every grain that he could see and smell and hear counted on him. And his count was 1. Seemed like a good enough number to start the process with. A rider in brown on a white horse sheepishly rode up to him. Something wrong with your train, sir? It was just a caboose in the middle of the empty desert. Yeah. Seems to be missing its engine all of a sudden. Yeah. Yeah. Josh hopped off Philly and wiped his brow. As the man said, I'm a brigadier general with the Buffalo Bills Wild Western, making me the highest ranking military commander in the Buffalo Nation. With that news, Philly trotted off. Philly, don't you dare leave me to... Josh turned back to the uniformed general and smiled. Boy, was it quiet when there was no train and no people around. Just a train car in the empty desert. Looks like it presented you a mighty fine chance to investigate the soil. The sand. Hey, you like it? I'd like it better next to water. Water. I'll go fetch some. Josh turned to where Philly should have been and then pointed at her, far in the distance, hopping on her hind legs like a puppy to reach the lone tree shading Brittany's well. You shouldn't have to, said the general, walking along the smooth rocks. This was a riverbed once. Fast flowing, too. And now it's a well. A deep one. McDermott had noticed the many valleys, basins, and gorges of the Buffalo Nation from the train. All of them hot and dry. When be the last time you saw rain? Josh laughed. He squinted back at the Irishman in the sun to see that he was sincere. Oh, no. Sir, I ain't never seen rain." McDermott stopped. "What?" "Not a drop, sir. This land's been in the Great Drought as far back as my first memory. 17 years it's been." "So it's true," the general whispered almost to himself. He was suddenly aware of the moisture of his own breath. "You mean you've heard of us?" Josh moved closer. Stories. Don't underestimate how far bad news can travel." "Is this pretty bad news?" "The worst drought in the histories of any known world in the multiverse is all." "It's just..." "What?" asked Josh. "Nobody knew there were people living here." Josh looked at this brigadier general in his ornate uniform, royal blue wool, glittering medals, an academy-trained commander from a land of rain and mists and clouds that Josh had only dreamed of. "What does a river actually sound like?" he would ask Philly from the rooftop of their family's beached ferry after a dinner rush. "Do brooks actually babble?" He'd wonder as he taught younglings how to make medicine from bandit flower. As Josh stared, he realized that each earnest letter he'd written from the secrecy of Windy Cave must have gone unseen. Every one of his achievements that he'd updated to potential mentors went unread. He had written to hundreds using the back cover of the Book of Plays as his desk and Philly his pillow. He'd written to every named character in the book, to every foreign kingdom, colony, and battlefield, careful to copy the spelling of the names exact. And not one lowest assistant of an assistant had given one letter enough mind to even take notice. Not that Josh was an aspiring soldier interested in formal combat training with attached evidence of skills and knowledge, but even that in the Buffalo Nation, there was life. You bloom where you're planted. It's impossible that all of them ignored every letter. Even by mistake, one would have been open to reuse the valuable paper that he'd saved his caps for. Which meant they never got it, because they weren't real. Because the Book of Plays, and everyone in it, his heroes, villains, and no-name farmers who would never give up hope, were myths. Mama was right. He'd been writing letters to fairy tales. "There are people here, sir," said Josh. "I can't speak to how many. All I know is 2 days' ride in any direction, you'll come by no more than my family and the Brittnys. But travelers do come through the ferry for breakfast and a bed on their way to parts unknown. And they speak of other homesteaders, wagon trains, tribes." "What about trains that have trouble keeping their cars attached?" "Revivalists," said Josh bitterly. "Every few years. They cross the desert with water sticks promising to unlock reservoirs and drumming up hope in the desperate until they get themselves run out of town. Thirsty." Philly whinnied by the distant well, begging the tree for an apple. "We learned long ago how to dig our own wells, how to tap into bygone rivers of our grandmother's time, and how to share it with our neighbors ourselves. And when there is a threat, we circle the wagons and teach our kids to shoot. How many mornings could I have slept in if I didn't believe in a fairy tale?" Josh thought. "How many broken bones? How many missed dinners? How many skipped barn dances at the Brittnys?" He thought of what his uncle gave up, his father, his mother. Josh took the varmint rifle off his shoulder. Philly whinnied again, nagging. How many hours of careful writing to prove his worth to people who didn't exist? It hurt because he loved it. The fire brought pain. That's us, Josh heard his memory tell Philly way back then. But I'm starting to wonder if someone shouldn't just put us out of our misery. Josh lowered his rifle at his horse. Was that a gunshot? Major General Bean looked up from his writing to Colonel Fraser in their rocking train car. 3 of them, to the west. I thought this was a dead world, Bean said, looking back at his documents. Then, without moving, he spoke his next thought. Where's the Brigadier? Colonel Fraser ripped open the carriage door to see nothing but the hot desert and some dragging brake cables behind them. Where's the observation car? He's a sharpshooter! McDermott shouted into Bean's carriage. They were in mid-conversation about the fact that there were people here, native people, strong people, which changed everything. Or changed nothing, depending on which commander had the war room floor. And their wringing hands. All of it appeared less important to the Major General, who continued to draft whatever letter he had in front of him at the moment. Your abductor? Asked Colonel Fraser. Yes! No! The native! The farm boy! It wasn't an abduction. Maliciously. Let me spit it out here. McDermott spoke fast as the final whistle shrieked. The locomotive had backed up for hours to reconnect the missing carriage in the twilight. This tree. Incredible! I can't even tell it's got fruit on it from where we were greeting in the desert, and he pegs off an apple for his horse. I mean, the risk of any mistake would wound the creature, but his confidence was such, it was nothing. He might have done it with his own mother at the water well. Not to even mention I gave full effort to wring his neck. Wrongly, I see, but holding nothing back. Major General Bean switched fountain pens from his Royal Cincy 77 safety pen, which had dried, to a single number 7 stylographic maroon pen. He primed it and continued writing. Sir, we might build an entire show around him, said an urgent McDermott. We can't know what we know now and leave this desert with just a pocket full of sand. Tell me, what good is a Wild Western without a sharpshooter at its heart? It was as if Bean heard nothing. A concussion of brake releases pounded each car. Tell me, sir! Exploded the Irish temper of McDermott. He's a prairie boy, said Bean coolly, looking up from his parchment. We need men. He's a sharpshooter who learned volley shot with no military academy. Exactly. No military training. Which only proves he's got skill over pedigree. Those Ivy officers won't know how to handle a Maverick. How many academy snipers can jump a Bronco through a moving train? I believe they use carriages, Brigadier. If not sleeper cars. The Major General indicated the lavish woodwork, lamps, and draperies around them. You don't know this. But the last deadly cowboy to set foot in these sands before the rain stopped wrote me. Cowboy Aikman, asked Fraser, who brought the fires? The same. He spoke of a mysterious letter from a land matching this description, although its landmarks were not listed on any known maps. It had the urine smell associated with cheap postage, and a target paper attached with bullet holes. And? Asked McDermott. Bean glanced at the notes beside him. Inaccurate. Long shot. Reported Mr. Mann. The one thing you can't train. Bean looked up. Is an untrainable long shot who smells like goat piss really who you want to build our campaign around? Fraser? Yes, sir. You read the ancient poems? At the academy? Asked McDermott, turning away to look at the Catlin painting on the wall. Yes, of course. Miller's epic about the hero wars. Yes, the levy, sir. Wasn't it Cowboy Man who was in that fable about the train? Got derailed by a no-name farmer with a varmint rifle? It was a BB gun, and only the last car was decoupled. And, Bean broke in, man was in first class at the center of the known universe. What's your point? McDermott stared into the painting. In it, a hulking bison with bloodshot eyes defended himself from 20 wolves, some already gored. McDermott's fist clenched. That bison was no academy graduate, but that bison would fight in this dirt until his heart was in the belly of wolves. McDermott felt the grit of sand still in his fist from hours earlier. A grit that couldn't be trained. And I wonder how many unanswered letters Aikman wrote to his mortal enemies to get help, to reveal his weaknesses, his upbringing, the wagon cart postage he could afford, to learn. McDermott turned from the painting and let the bison stare down the commanders in front of him. In a fight to the death, I want to stake it all on the one that never quits. Let us not confuse life for sentimental mythology. Unless we're in one, a lost mythology. That or a damn good echo of it has hijacked our own story this very night. We have at least one living strongheart of old shouting to us from the same desert and Great Drought that was supposed to kill all life. That is who we serve. Brigadier McDermott slapped his palm on the uncharted map in the words unknown frontier. Sand and dirt bounced from his wool cuffs. His dirt. He took a breath and composed. If we are to defend our dirt, we need a buffalo who is not driven to work and play because some high command has shipped orders, or because it's easy, tinseled, or rich-making, but because it's right. A strong heart. To win local hearts and minds? Asked Colonel Fraser. No, said Bean from across the room. Because that is the way of the old Mafia, according to ancient translations of a dead language. Or according to our future. McDermott, called Bean. I'm glad you spoke your true mind. The dreaming Irishman turned to his superior. But I made you a promise to tell you when you're wrong. We both respect the truth. You're wrong today. Or rather, you are not seeing the details through all of the emotion. McDermott's bloodshot eyes held his gaze. The buffalo painting behind him stared down the Major General. The kid's bullets couldn't have shot an apple out of a tree at limit range. You know better. If a bullet strikes an apple, it bursts to bits from both ends. Yes, but an apple fell from the tree and was enjoyed by the horse. I saw it. Because the boy didn't shoot the apple. Bean cracked a smile. He shot the stem. Major General Bean sealed the letter he'd drafted the whole time with wax, and he handed it to McDermott as the carriages bucked their pins and began to roll. Now, find out what we're supposed to call this no-name farmer. Josh of Allentown. Where can I find him? Asked McDermott behind the lantern light to the mysterious figure who had come to the well. A hero like that? No telling. He roams the lands, they say, often in disguise, speaking brown bear, sniffing gravel for traces of outlaws. Really? No, I'm just kidding. Josh waits tables upwind at his family's inn. Just follow the rattlesnake nests. Brittany lowered her Zuba's headscarf. This young woman was the second native-born McDermott had met. Seeing McDermott's reaction to the hiss of just one rattler, Brittany added, Maybe I should just take you. The Firebaugh Ferry, the sandblasted sign read in front of the maroon ship. Despite its worn paint, it glowed warm inside. It was red, whispered Josh, wiping his hands on his apron. No, red how? Shouted a round man, folding his napkin. Shh, Uncle Brian. I swear it. He just happened to be standing alone in the desert. Who knows why?
Josh, you eat the cake, you do the dishes,
said Mrs. Allen, fetching the tea and loganberry leaves from the old navigation bay. Numerous herbs and spices grew in retrofitted sextants and telescopes. Their brass reflected her son behind her. Outgrowing his apron, and yet still on a boat with no river. She focused instead at her father's family crest, an apple tree painted on a map of the ancient Niagara River Delta.
And you bloom where you're planted.
I know. Do I live in a world of catchphrases? Josh gathered up the tin plates from Uncle Brian and the chefs. So red like a tomato, or more orange red like Big Archway Bridge? More orange, I guess. Like the rocks, said Josh, holding the plates for Philly to lick clean. Yes, the horse lived in the family restaurant. Seems she had trouble leaving Josh ever since she was a foal. Red like the rocks, said Chef Pooh. Wow, it makes you wonder what else could be possible out there, Chef Norm added. Where? Beyond Back Valley, said Josh, looking outside, past his tip jar with a dozen caps. There's not one of us more deserving than you to stumble upon such a phenomenon, especially just minding your own business in the desert, began Uncle Brian, with a big yawn of late night. But what I wouldn't give to see that. Don't look now. But a girl burst in from the quarterdeck shouting. Brittany, Josh said. Hi. The Brigadier General Josh derailed is hitching his horse outside. A dozen heads filled the portholes of the ferry behind McDermott. Brigadier General! Uncle Brian shouted in joy.
Derailed?
Mrs. Allen shouted in fury. McDermott casually turned to face the boat, and everyone dove flat on the floor. From her belly, Brittany whispered, Guys, he's got red hair. I'm charged as new command at the Buffalo Bill Wild Western, said McDermott. He'd been settled into their least smashed table, offered fresh wings, weck, and whiskey, all of which he declined but were furnished anyway. And every time he broke eye contact with someone, their eyes snapped back to his hair. Just watching it. The Buffalo Bill Wild West show? Asked Mrs. Allen, steeping his tea. That's that there comedy routine near the fort, asked Uncle Brian, trying hard not to stare at the fanciful red mustache. The Circus Brothers, right? McDermott cleared his throat. I'm firstly fixin' to change that. He stood and everyone looked up. The Brigadier stepped toward an old, ripped buffalo banner hanging in the rafters. They are more than a reenactment show. They're more than a gimmick. The Buffalo Bills are meant to be a mighty collection of Western specialists, each with a role necessary to successfully execute any mission required of it, civil or combat. McDermott turned with growing gestures. They are meant to be this frontier's defenders, protectors, a platoon to restore the dignity to this land. The patron stared blank. So, not clowns, then? No, not clowns, said McDermott, sternly, but he betrayed a slight smile to Brittany. It will be a process. I'll be asking this land to believe in a process for change. But as fragile as belief is, I'll be asking no one to risk nothing for it. But if we are able to prove change is possible, it won't be a belief anymore, but something stronger, something real. Trust. Well, my grandsire, sir, said the man known as Uncle Brian, stepping forward and taking a chivalrous knee. You've come to the right, proper, best luxury ferry boat. That boy there with the tiny apron on. I actually don't have an apron on, Josh blurted out quickly, throwing his to Philly, but it unfurled behind him and floated down in full form. I don't even know what that is, except for, what I've read about them in my studies. The one who threw his apron just now is a master at the three major skills: French swordplay, gunslinging, and the cross. Josh looked up, and he stepped forward. And, Brigadier, I humbly report that he is also a top 4 in the age for growing cantaloupe. Cantaloupe? The melon. Thanks, Uncle Brian. That's a good place to stop. It's your best skill. Yeah, but not for dangerous combat missions. The Brigadier handed Bean's brittle envelope to the farm boy. He looked at it, and he looked at it longer. It was the first envelope and letter he'd received. Without opening it, Josh handed the envelope he'd dreamed of his entire life to his mother. "I'm needed here, sir. Not in a fairy tale." "Josh," said his mother, almost in tears. "My little pumpkin. You are needed here more than you know. But not to wait tables and repaint the hall. It was never about that. But you bloom where you're..." The Mafia's dying. Everything stopped in the room. Nothing can live without water. Sustained, clean water. Without it, the younglings vanish into the ground or over the horizon, and the Buffalo Nation will die with it. We can only drink from the reservoirs of the bygones for so many summers without replenishing it. The Mafia folk have the strongest hearts I know, but we will not last the winter. Tomorrow, the Mafia blooms or dies. Wait, you want me to save the Mafia? No, that may not even be possible. But we must try. How? She returned the envelope to her son with a smile and reached up to the ferry's foghorn cable, a chain long since broken. Trust the process. A train whistle boomed from the desert ferry. The boom became a growl of a sandstorm. Things had gotten worse. The Allens, the Brittneys, and 6 travelers, including Uncle Brian, huddled with Josh, and Philly, of course, in the boiler room of the ferry. It was dark, and sand sprayed the hull and leaked through cracks. As it filled piles at their feet, the youngest asked, "Is it possible to drown in sand?" "No," said someone. "Not tonight," said Josh. Their fate was on a timer, like the victims of an hourglass. Suddenly, the fireball lunged forward. The ferry hadn't moved in decades, but the waves of sand dunes outside shifted like an ocean in slow-motion film, with hyper-fast grains distorting every frame. "Hold on!" shouted Brittany. The fireball ferry and all of her sand and contents dove from her port side to the starboard. A shattered jar of crystal rocks popped purple sparks in the blackness until all panicking stopped. "Happy New Year," Mrs. Allen joked. Hours and miles later, Josh threw runaway bales of hay into the wagon sled Philly dragged. It was silent now. Apart from their footsteps in the loose sand, Josh's headscarf covered all but his dusty eyes. The drought had only grown more severe since the brigadier made his promises. Some already called him a failed revivalist. But Josh didn't quit hope. He whistled to Philly, following him up another dune, him and his sleeve full of apples. He may be spoiling her, but he tossed another empire over his shoulder to hear her pounce, catch, chomp, and her big nostrils gave a grunt of gratitude. "Gross," he said to her jokingly. Josh wiped horsey nose spit off the back of his neck and walked on for another hay bale and stopped as he bent for it. Another drop of spit hit his shoulder, but Philly hadn't brayed. Josh looked up fast. Something foreign hit his eye. No. He removed his headscarf to a stunned mouth. The noise of it started as a whisper, and in seconds it rushed to multiples of volume he hadn't known until it hit him. Rain poured from the sky. Rain poured from the sky. Josh smiled, choked, laughed, screamed. He unbridled Philly and let her run and dance with him. Forget the hay, they would grow meadows of grass. For both drenched creatures, it was the first time in their lives that rain fell from the sky, just like the fairy tale accounts had described. But this was better. Soaking in it themselves, they themselves, living now, could feel this thing on their wet, goosebumped skin. Yippee-ki-yay! The drought was over. Somehow, somewhere in time, in the interlinked worlds of the multiverse that Josh had never known, they had done it. The Great Drought was over. Josh, soaked in joy, collapsed to his knees and he whispered to the falling sky of the new year, "Trust the process." Josh and Philly galloped toward home, but in his mind, the receding dunes that night were the slopes of an open book, the underdog characters at their lowest points, and the rising actions of paragraphs and papers they could ride through. He and Philly glided over these miracles and sentences of a fairy tale like a voice box reading to a farm boy. "That's us," whispered Josh to his youngest horse. "In it." It was the night Josh realized anything could happen in real life. There was no telling what would happen next, as they were in the blank pages now. And nobody knows how it will end. The filly rode like thunder, and a hero hurtled through the sands into
The 4 years. Later, Arrowhead Rock. Red.
Josh's bruised and cut open face glistened red with blood, his and Philly's and theirs.
Black.
Josh fell unconscious into
Red.
rock and snow. More red, orange red, like rock he had heard from some
Black.
dreamscape that had happened to someone else, like some fragment he had read somewhere
Back.
in time. Josh jolted awake with a yell and lost sight again. He was 4 years older now, and dying. He vomited blood, only his, and held the hot wound in his stomach. He was rolled in bison fur and dragged away from Philly. Why didn't she?
Blackness.
He woke again to freezing water being poured into his mouth. He thrashed his head so that he could keep fighting. "Let me at them." It's over. No, we're not done. It's over, Maverick. They're gone. Rage. Gone? Who's gone? I'm right here. Where is she?
Blackness.
Help! Help! Bellowed Dawkins, far outside New Fort York. White wolves howled at the winter night. It was a fever dream of wilderness and shadow. Hawkeye Johnson would be on lookout. He could do it. Help! Screamed Dawkins, clenching his teeth and heaving the load of bison fur on his shoulders. He'd run the icy stockade planks toward the western shouts, toward him. Dawkins raged forward again. Johnson would... 3 sharp alert whistles chirped. Yes! Thank ye! Dawkins exhaled. Bates would stand guard, Morse would storm out, Doc would wake. McDermott would know what to do. Help was on the... Dawkins collapsed. His face in the snow, ice-cold water from Little Niagara Creek flowed against his own furs and sweat and blood, relieving and painfully cold. He pushed with the last of his strength against the bison-wrapped load on his back. It crunched to the frozen rocks. Dawkins couldn't speak for lack of breath, but pulled back the fur. The bloodied head, battered, swollen beyond feature. No breath. No! Dawkins shook it with his frostbit fist. Angry. Stay! He shouted. A cough. Alive. Josh of Allentown. Josh breathed 3 times, but his jaw was broken. What? Asked Dawkins, freezing beside him. He hadn't spoken since the border. Philly! Go back! Ah! Dawkins let out a groan like he'd been stabbed. Brother! Horse! Go back! Josh's voice was gravel. I know Philly's your horse, brother. Was she that too? Besides being the other half of Josh during the 4 years? The last 4 years of blooming adventures spanning the frontier, hunting invaders, outrunning disasters, and seeking the advice of old Uncle Brian, the best mentor they found west of the Seneca. Philly witnessed every landmark of a Buffalo nation and a young man's coming of age in the Great Drought. And she truly saved his life.
I'm going. His eyes meant it. His neck moved to break free of either bounds or body, whichever came first. No, Josh. Easy, damn it. You see, I'm trying to tell you something. Dawkins got his numb fist on Josh's wounded shoulder. She's died, Josh. You lost her, and I'm mighty sorry.
Dawkins broke down at the final word.
No. Yes, Josh. Josh jerked his broken face toward the snowfall. Painful tears ran down the mud and blood to his ears.
If she stays this close, you'll have trouble leaving her.
Blackness.
An ugly cast of faces looked down at him. Who is he? A scout? Spy. Fur trapper, probably. Their scowls and scars and tired eyes were wet with snow and mud. Cowboy hats, wild hair, and pajamas with overcoats marked this ragtag crew.
I found him like this in the borderlands, said Dawkins.
No weapon and no horse. The gang clamored all at once, arguments, accusations, confessions, and sarcasm. Then it stopped with 2 words. Lieutenant General. An Irish voice spoke in the silence, a voice Josh recognized.
Though he was a mere brigadier 4 years ago.
This, here, is Josh of Allentown. Josh is a long-range gunslinger, and it seems, one hard-to-kill maverick. That's not the boy Maverick, asked some well-read voice. What? Tiny Bear Morse, a giant, stepped forward, spit on his hand and wiped blood off the man's left cheek. He startled back. Oh, B, said someone, astonished. The XVII tattoo. 17. There, inked on his cheek forever. It's true. Talkers had been telling of a maverick gunslinger walking the west beyond New Fort York. As brave or as boyishly foolish he was, marked was he with a tattoo for each year he and his suffered in the Great Drought. 17 years. XVII. For this crew in the lamplight, a story had come to life.
I've asked Gardner Dawkins to keep an eye after him and my highest-ranking general, a native-born I found here going by Uncle Brian, said McDermott. The farmer had no tales about him then in the sands. No pretty certificates in the Ivy libraries. Just skeptics. That's changed. The Irish gleam faded from the Lieutenant General's eye as he got to business. Doc Edmonds, see to it he recovers. Yes, sir. Bill, see to it he learns the ways of the Mafia. A as one of us. Many boomed as one.
Yes, sir.
Not clowns, then, Josh thought. I'm gonna set the bone now, kid, said Doc. Sorry, what? Asked Josh. Snap! Shortly after, our Josh woke up, and well before he could fully walk. He snuck from the nurse bed and into a blizzard without waking Doc Edmonds or his family. In Slow Week's time, he found his filly, the only and the greatest steed of the 4 years. Josh threw a burning powder horn to scatter the coyotes and challenged the rest with a knife until they surrendered. He buried her in the dark days in the frozen dirt of the disputed lands. He thanked the spirits for her and tied a braid of her mane to his hip to allow her Orenda to strengthen him. The mounted gunslinger with no horse and no gun walked the frontier that spring and summer. Just a man.
He walked in the shadows of the Colossus Heel.
In the Grand Gorge. In the buffalo herd. In the rain. What could he have done different? What could he do now? Start again from nothing? The end of the drought didn't end pain. He grieved the loss with this pain, then anger, and finally peace. For grief, too, was a process. Look who decided to show up.
Josh turned around to see a Buffalo soldier ride across Niagara Creek in a custom-tailored uniform. The afternoon sun sparkled off the pair of chromium six-shooters. A cowboy and shining armor-plated pistols. This man was a gunslinger. Captain Taylor, Mounted Infantry, Buffalo Bills. Josh took his hand. Gee, it's an honor to meet you, sir. Tyrod the Tailor, galloping gun. Letting go of his hand in the long silence, Taylor said, "Say your name now." "I know it, but you're supposed to say it." "Oh, Tyrod, I'm sorry. Captain Taylor, I'm real sorry." Josh shook his hand again to make up for it. "See, all you did there was just say my name. Josh of Allentown, sir. Real sorry." Josh Allen of Allentown, Josh whispered to himself. "It's a lot more detailed up close," said Captain Taylor, pointing quick to the wooden fort in the train station in the middle of the endless frontier. "What is that smell?" "Cheerios, kid. Cheerios. Mrs. Baker roasts them fresh every day." "Wow! Country boy, you're about to experience the sophistication of a real town. New Fort York has somewhere between 75 and 100 permanent residents. That's the most citified center in the entire realm. And not one of them folks is a farmer. Though, I suppose they do all keep buffalo gardens. And chickens." Taylor looked back and forth for eavesdroppers, then whispered, "It's for their wings." They came up past the Niagara Creek watermill with the great wheels spinning in emerald waters, dripping and splashing along the mill race. The mill can be outfitted for any industry, from grain to textile zubas, but there's always the most demand for tables. Tables? Yep. They crossed the creek, hooves clunking on the wooden bowstring truss bridge. Josh stared up at the two twin watchtowers of New Fort York. Enormous, all brown timber with steep copper-plated roofs. At their peak, two buffalo flags rippled in the wind, stars and bolts radiating on the navy fabric. "Hey, go Bills!" "Go Bills!" "Go Bills!" The duo passed through the fortress gate, exchanging smiles and greetings with real-life Mafia folk. Delicious smokes and spices perfumed the air, and Josh followed their scent to a recess in the gate itself. The sign above the big cook read, "Gabriel's." Must be where they all get their wings, thought Josh. "Go, Bill," said Gabriel. Inside the spiked elmwood walls stood a whole barracks of small buildings, tents, and craftspeople. All of them connected by wooden water flumes, which linked the water wheel, reservoir tanks, and an upper-level irrigation system. Up there on the roofs of these sheds were everything from Three Sisters gardens, bathtubs hanging over fires, bird baths, fountains, and cascades glittering in the sunlight. Boy, when you end a drought, you end a drought. Yes, sir. Lorenzo's invention. "The waterworks are our way of filling up the boiler now," said Captain Taylor, pointing to the train station yonder. "Is that?" I wondered if you'd recognize it. The Stampede locomotive, with all of its cars attached. Mafia engineers washed the chromium silver steam engine, and her Pullman carriages of blue, red, and silver. Hand-painted lettering read, "Buffalo Bills, Wild West, and Congress of Rough Riders of the World." "It didn't look like that in the Great Drought times," exclaimed Josh. "No," said Captain Taylor. "Stampede has come a long way since our stint in vaudeville. The whole railroad's been replaced. It's a stronger caliber track. Stampede is a palace on wheels, and formidable in battle." "Battle?" asked Josh. "It does say Wild West, don't it?" The only yellow flag came when Josh asked, "Hey, what's in there?" just before they left New Fort York. "Oh, that's a terribly large hornet's nest nobody messes with." "Right, but the big..." thing that the hive is stuck to? Oh, well, don't you worry about the silos. The two gunslingers turned toward a colorful street market within the walls. Farmers, fishermen, and archaeologists had come from different corners of the nation. Like to see any jewelry I'd made? Asked a vendor wearing a vest and a warm smile. Josh bought a gemstone from Crystal Beach before catching up with Taylor and a renowned native architect. She showed off upcoming plans for a community horse barn on Main Street. Rich stable, because of the wealth it'll provide everyone. As they continued through the colorful stalls, Captain Taylor reflected, "You will find the people of the Buffalo Nation, from their townhouses, teepees, or tailgates. They share one heart. They are exceedingly generous, loyal, and authentic lot. And it's rare. Where it comes from, I do not know. But I have my suspicion that the hardships of the Great Drought had something to do with it, making this people uniquely bonded, or something bigger. Part of an even older story, perhaps. But of all the places I've fought and rambled on, it's good here. Small, but an overlooked pocket of goodness. Well, I've seen it. Back home. My great-grandpa left Allentown with nothing but his ferry and one apple. He nearly starved, but he never ate the apple. He meant to plant it instead so that his family and neighbors might eat from it one day. To bloom. Josh whispered to himself. He thought of Mama, Philly, and so he did. He planted it for us, and for others.
Sure, son. Your family had it, no doubt. And some of the sons of guns you met in the 4 years likely did too. But you are yet to meet the rest of this land's mafia. Best to sit, or their kind of love will knock you over. And that there, Captain Taylor finished, looking from the townsfolk direct to Josh's eyes. That is worth protecting. That's what you do? Asked Josh, a young man who could also be described as generous, loyal, and genuine. In a word. And a word is enough for now. We'll miss sundown.
Outside the smoky, delicious Gabriel Gate, Josh saw for the first time Main Street, boy. Bison carts pulled, horses trotted, shop bells chimed, and Mafia folk bustled. Suits, dresses, feathers, and top hats, all with blue and red accents. A saloon pianola played Shout. It's unbelievable. It was one dirt street, stretching 4 blocks toward the distant frontier trails. Lined shoulder to shoulder, every shop and specialty one could ever need in a high society like this. The Anchor Bar, Duff's Saloon, Elmo's Public House, Barbill, 911 Tavern, Gene McCarthy's Inn. All of them 3-story establishments with a front porch, hitching post, and chicken wings, with rooms to rent. Bubbles floated out of the windows over Jim's Steak Emporium.
And stay out! Yelled the proprietor with her hair up and an apron on. A few cowboy hats and parasols turned. A porch sweeper stopped, all to see a drunk tumble into the mud. He asked for ranch! The townsfolk scoffed and turned away from him. Sober up, rancher, said Captain Taylor, pulling him to his feet. You're too roostered if you ain't calling for blue cheese. Yes, sir. Go Bills. Go Bills. You remember Doc Edmonds' house yonder? Then that building's town hall. The general split time there.
And Mayor lives in the loft.
It had an artful, decorative look to it. Do all the Bills live here, in town? You eager to meet them proper? Meet them? Could I? The captain laughed. We live all over the Buffalo Nation. Some are here on defense of the fort, even though there ain't ever been an attack off-season. And some do live in town, looking to wake snakes. But most of us prefer to live under the stars on the open range. Campfires, cricket bugs.
And scenery is mighty full as heaven. Nature's our first tenant.
I see. Josh heard it all, but he was still marveling at each unique building they passed. This bank had a type of domed roof. That schoolhouse had a bell tower with carved wooden gargoyles. Omnipresent, the tinny, plunking player piano kept hammering Shout with patrons in every window singing along. Folks of all type, Clothes, color, class, chanting together. Red in the face.
Pa wouldn't even believe this. Some children ran through, saying hello as fast as they could to the fabled boy Maverick. Captain Taylor smiled and nodded toward a terracotta office with Poyer and Hyde, attorneys at law, lettered in the glass. The kids ran in to assist the Esquires. The very best in the multiverse, they are. Brilliant, decorated veterans of the Water War to end the drought. So are you, Captain. Proud to have been a part of it. To be a part, exclaimed Josh.
And this here is the Buffalo Theater, said the captain, changing the subject.
Sharing the alleyway was Broadway's general store. The last buildings in town besides the water tower was Ellicott's Square Dance Hall and Moving Picture Show in the old library. The stories that must be in there, Josh whispered. A boy who knew only one book and the magic it possessed. What kind of wings you want? Asked the captain.
You know you got the name for it, said Taylor. The duo sat atop the water tower platform. They watched the sun set, pink and purple, and orange and navy over the mountain horizon. They filled their tin cups from the tap and ripped rich, juicy chicken meat off the bones. For greatness. What? A show at the Buffalo Theater was starting to draw a crowd from the range. A bluegrass band played Iris for the lovers in the dance hall. A V of geese flew between the cloud castles. All the great gunslingers have two first names. Jim Kelly, Tom Brady, Josh Allen. Tyrod Taylor. Ha! Laughed the captain.
You're the galloping gun who ended the longest drought ever known. It reset the era.
The captain didn't say anything, just looked at his dangling boots and back at the sunset. Josh didn't notice that there was something to notice, and he grabbed two more flats. Besides, those guys have storybook names because they aren't real.
They're just myths.
Captain Taylor pointed far away as he spotted the flicker of a campfire being lit. Little more than a lightning bug from here. Josh spotted it too. What though? Asked Taylor, finally processing. Machine Gun Kelly and the Immortal aren't real? No? Josh looked at him with a look of don't be ridiculous. Captain Taylor didn't smile though, so he specified. Well, they're real characters from the legends. Tall tales, but they're just bedtime stories to warn kids about the Patriots. You still are a kid, joked Captain Taylor, when suddenly a sonic boom shattered the twilight into pieces. Taylor reflexively covered his head, then lunged to his chest to reach for the tumbling Josh, 5 stories above his death. Josh screamed as his hair became the only thing holding him up. His eyes saw an alien craft, like a flying train engine, rocket through the sky. Conical clouds detonated into concussions. Bullets of wind smashed planks from the buildings. A horse to the ground. Normal sounds were made silent, and only between cloudbursts did their volume rise again for a moment. Without asking, Captain Taylor lift-tossed Josh for just a moment by the head so that when he let go, which he did, by the way, no! Josh could throw his hand into Tyrod's forearm. Yeah, got it, yelled Josh. I know, yelled Tyrod. The bullet craft ripped back around with an explosive sound. Both gunslingers turned to watch and snapped again as it flew past. The town and the fort were circled by a spiraling scratch of clouds. Taylor swung Josh toward a wooden ladder, nailed to the frame. His impact pulled 6 nails straight out. They didn't land, though, but flew on the next concussion toward the fort. The alert whistle blew from the lookout tower. Thank you, as if anyone had missed the sound of a mountain falling on the town. The craft skipped over a hill near the Buffalo Trail, exploding mud and worms. Josh and Tyrod swung down the structure. Johnny and the other Goo Goo Dolls ran from the barn with a few fleeing couples as others ran in. One screaming man dove onto a flaming wooden table. Poyer and Hyde, Esquires, sprinted up the street and removed their spectacles. Doc Edmonds came out of the Buffalo Theater. Tiny Morse, still giant, ripped doors off a stagecoach to use as shields. The craft shook the earth as it plowed its way to the foot of Main Street.
Defensive positions,
Doc shouted. Taylor drew his glaring pistols in a flash. His stallion charged past, and he effortlessly jumped on. The pulsing, grounded engines were still roaring too loud to speak. It broke the sound barrier 6 times, yelled Hyde. Yet its shell withstood the full-speed collision, added Poyer. What could be that strong? Whatever it is, I don't like it, boomed Tiny Bear Morse. The engines began to scream down. Tyrod rode his stallion back to the center and halted fast. What should we do, Captain? Asked Josh. No horse, no weapon. Taylor replied, We're all captains. Just then, a robotic man sprung higher than the water tower, and blue flames landed him hard to the western Main Street. Metal and screens flashed. A distorted voice spoke through speakers.
I come in peace.
A metallic breath.
I am 40 Miller class.
The rocket spaceship silenced, as did the entire frontier town.
I come from the future.
Josh thought he heard something. He looked back over his shoulder, away from the council fire. It almost sounded like the tectonics he would hear occasionally in the 4 years. 40 Miller class is here upon my urgent request, said General Bean. Josh turned back to the council of Buffalo Bills. Soldiers, trappers, lawyers, doctors, gunmen, spies, and him. And the 40 cyborg, a man with spectacles, and the mechanical armor of an exoskeleton attached to bone. The metal glowed, hummed, and followed his every movement like a shadow as he tossed his apple core into the fire. Lieutenant General McDermott announced, A2 is one of us now. Hear, hear, said Captain Taylor low but fully heard. He sat beside Josh and didn't raise his head, only his tin cup. Welcome to our Mafia. Hey, hey! Cried Blizzard Dancer with his chin to the stars. Echoed all of the sachems, heroes, commanders, and cavalry. Repeated Blizzard Dancer. Boomed the Buffalo Bills. 40 Miller class dropped to a knee with a clank and bowed his head to his wrist. A tuft of triangular hair exposed on his scalp.
Deep obeisance, my comrades.
Tiny Bear Morse glared coldly at 40. A weakening is upon us, interrupted a scout, galloping in. How? So soon? Hyde, get the general to safety, commanded McDermott. Oh, let's go, said Hyde, closing his briefcase. Bucktail, where's it coming from? Blizzard Dancer asked his deputy.
Los Angeles,
cut in the metallic voice. Many heads turned. A surge of gears pushed 40 to great scale, standing.
Permission, sir.
Granted, said McDermott.
My friends of the Ram Squadron, robot augmented Marines, fought in the Winter War. No unit class could defeat us.
Between broken sentences, his iron breath amplified.
We were unstoppable when the super collapse centered and the power filled our blood. We were to trap our enemies in our own realm. We were victorious.
The cyborg sat down heavy, drained. Each time he stuttered, his glowing lights muted black.
We took it all.
We have Admiral Brady to thank for that maneuver, said Brigadier General Fraser coldly. During the last war, the Immortal read the stars of the supercollapse and drew his armada to homeport for an annihilation trap. Admiral Brady, thought Josh. The bedtime story who ain't real, said Captain Taylor quietly to Josh. Without the 6-star general, Admiral Brady coronated himself on the deck of the unrecognized fleet in his own harbor, unprecedented and unstoppable, like he so often is. With all that power, on a 2-front war, How was Brady finally blocked? Asked Gardner Dawkins.
Us,
Said the machine voice of the ram.
and only us. We lured him in an LA trap. He bargained for release. He taught us his way. And we never looked back.
And now you've bridged our worlds by rocketing through the border skies of the multiverse. Bear Morse growled as he stood up. Tall. Easy, said Dawkins. You don't fool me. You caused the weakening, Marine. Sure, one would come, but not this early, and for some reason you chose to push your engines here. Tell me, why does a rich mercenary leave the luxuries of superspace and an unstoppable squadron under the superpower for some dirt road and a log fort? Why? 4-0 did not stand.
It is in an empty land. It is quiet. You have no space antenna or so fun a network. In ours, without fission cables, my RAM suit is useless. This deprivation makes me sad.
There it is, said Bear Morse, adjusting his suspenders out of nerves. Some truth?
But I chose you anyway, Bear. You have one of the best, only one chance to break the unstoppables.
The flashing lights dimmed around 4-0, so only fire lit his eyes now. Well, Bear Morse took a breath. I do agree with you there. Except that 16 armies fell to them in battle, said someone. What makes us different than the Royal Bengal Empire? Or the Immortal Admiral's fleet? The new cook? Several eyes looked to Cookie, the youngest, who looked up from a stew. Send me then. An army of veterans turned their heads to the unshrinking newcomer, Josh, the boy maverick. He and Philly had taken on dangerous missions during the 4 years, and this sounded like one of them. His first without his horse. But then something happened Josh did not anticipate. I'll be his watch, said Gardner Dawkins immediately to the Lieutenant General. Odds like that, you'll need a doc, said Doc. He stepped in with them.
4-0 Miller class. Our demobilized.
The flashing cyborg moved forward. Then I'd better keep an eye on him, said Tiny Bear Morse, and plug him in. Utah Davis asked, could you use a spy on this insurgents? How about 2? Added Mackenzie Slim. The coachman stepped forward, then Boom Boom Milano. Hi, how are you? And the 6 heavies of the gun crew. Captain Taylor stood up, his spurs and chrome pistols glittering. He put his arm on the shoulder of Josh of Allentown. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I'll do whatever I can to help you, sir, said Josh. Captain Taylor took a breath and offered a warm smile. Then lead these men into greatness. What? Greatness. Josh backed up a step. No, Captain, this is your gang. I'm just here to help, he exclaimed. I'm not ready, and I'm not ready to ride into the sunset. But you don't need to be ready to get started. Captain! But Josh didn't know what to say. These bills are yours now. Taylor clapped him on the shoulder again, tapped his cheek, and walked for his stallion. Josh was left in the center of the hardened, ragtag members of the Buffalo Bills. Greatness, kid! Shouted Captain Taylor without looking back. Until he did, laughing. You got the names for it. The train whistle blew. The stampede labeled Buffalo Bills Wild West and Congress of Rough Riders of the World screamed toward a phenomenon unlike any other. What in the world is that? Josh asked, dropping a space helmet to the floor. The train's window panes rattled as Josh put his face and tattoo against them to strain forward. The sky and plains of the open frontier melted. There was no other way to put it. The night and railroad melted like wax up ahead. You mean what in the multiverse? said Rawhide Oliver in white, blue, and red alloy armor that 4-0 had smuggled. That's a multiverse? That is a weak, brother. A weakening in the borders which can temporarily bridge different realms, explained Dawkins, adjusting futuristic armor plating from the ornate Pullman car of the 1850s. During a weakening season, they occur every 7 days, or thereabouts. This is the first week, and it's early. Bigfoot Phillips sat on the floor and hummed the tune of a folk song, Seven Nation Army. Windows shook again with turbulence. And what is a multiverse? Josh asked Dawkins. Rawhide Oliver bellowed a loud laugh and spoke loudly over the shaking tectonics. It's all that you can imagine, boy. And then, everything else. The second whistle blew. Phillips hummed louder. A lurch on the track sent Josh to the ground. But trains don't lurch. Josh watched the white cloud outside the window melt half into the night sky. Darkness projected shadow onto light.
Dawkins, does the weakening not take us to Los Angeles?
The train takes us to Los Angeles. All of the glass smashed on the stampede. Every window, every lamp, every cup, tray, and barometer at once.
But the weakening takes us through time.
Josh vomited.